All right, let's give this a shot. Privet, druzy, ta, pidpisniki. I know I messed that up. Vitayu mi pershi is drovk video na Salyut-S, the Kiev 80. All right, now that all my Ukrainian subscribers are flying over here to punch me in the mouth, let's talk about the Comrade Hasselbladsky, as it's fondly called, the Salyut-S, or here it is in the Russian script, also called the Kiev 80. This is a 120 film 6x6 format interchangeable lens SLR. What does that mean? It means that it takes 120 film, not 35 millimeter. It uses a single lens, this one right here. There's a mirror inside of this box that reflects light up to a focusing screen here. Single lens reflex. The interchangeable lens means that the lens can be, here it is on this side, let me turn it around this way, removed from the camera by someone stronger than me. There we go. At any point when you're not taking a photo, and another one can be put on, and it won't affect the outcome of your images. There we go. It has no light meter, at least not without the light meter prism, which would have been, I think there was a light meter prism for this, which would have fit onto the waist level finder that I have right here as another alternative viewing prism. Had shutter speeds of 1/2 second up to 1/1000th and bulb. The flash sync speed on this camera is 1/30th of a second. And it was the same exact camera as the Kiev 80, which is the export version. So as you can see, I have the non-export version here. If it was an export version, it would have said Kiev, K-I-E-V, using the old pre-independence spelling, 80. The Salyut-S was designed for professional photographers. It was based on the Hasselblad, the Hasselblad 1000 or 1600, one of those two. And it has a lot in common with it. So in terms of many in common features, the overall look and layout. The build quality, however, on this is not quite up to the same standard as the Hasselblads. Yeah. This was made by the Arsenal Manufacturing Company in Kiev, which was then called Kiev when it was made in Russia, but now we call it Kiev as it's part of Ukraine, and it was made from 1972 until 1980. Now, if you have your Kiev 80, we're going to go over the camera and all of the different features and talk about what they are, starting here on the top. This right here is the viewfinder, in which you can push this lever to the side and it will pop open. And then if we push, there we go. Push the same lever and that unlocks the magnifying glass. So you can frame your image this way and then use the magnifying glass to obtain fine focus. Here's the release for the film back. With any luck, I'll actually be able to get this reattached this time. Nope, this film back. Oh man, this film back. Makes me wonder if it's this film back or this camera that's a problem. I think it's the film back. We're gonna leave the film back off because apparently it's not going back on, and we're gonna talk about what the other features on this camera are. We'll come here to the back of the camera, and you can see we've got the serial number down here. This interface, which is used for advancing the film after the shutter is fired. The actual shutter curtain, which is a gold metal shutter curtain. So here are the clips that are supposed to allow the film back to stay on. Man, and also this interface here, which communicates with the film back to tell it when to advance the film. So then on the film back, this is a side that faces it. This is the area for the negative. This is the gears that interface over here, the communication part right here. And then these two openings are supposed to supposed to connect it to these hooks so that this film back can actually stay on the camera. All right. On the sides, can I get it this time? No, man. Hey, it went that time. That's a nice change of pace. Okay, on this side of the camera, this is the advance knob. So when film's loaded, oh man, I have to take this apart. Okay, in the second video, I'm going to show you with a different film back than this one how this works. But basically, this allows us to advance the film to the first frame after we load it, and then it doesn't do anything else. Frame count window. These two white dots will turn orange when the camera is ready to take a photo. Strap lug. Film advance knob and shutter timing knob. Pull it out to adjust the shutter speed, and after a photo's been taken, you would advance it to rearm the shutter. On this side of the camera, we have the flash sync, which is for X and M bulbs right here. There we go. X mode, and then this lever down here switches between the two M bulbs. So generally speaking, unless you have a bulb-based flash, just leave this in X. Any flash that uses a reusable bulb, like, you know, this flash right here, will work. So at 1/30th of a second in X mode. This right here is the film back film chamber release lock, unlock knob, and removing knob. And then of course we have a little slot here that we put the dark slide into. On the front of the camera, here we have the lens mount and the lens mounting index, shutter button, and lens release button right here. And on the bottom of the camera, we have this gigantic tripod socket. Honestly, could not tell you if that is standard or aftermarket. And then a couple of clips to hold the film back in place. On the back of the film back, we have a film speed reminder dial so that you can use this triangle to set the film speed to whatever film speed you're using to remind you of what you have mounted. And also when it comes time to load the film, you flip this down and then you look at the numbers on the back of the paper and advance the film manually until you get to number 1, and that's how you know you've properly aligned the film. So I have some tips for you on this camera that, man, some things you need to know about using this camera. The first one has to do with the shutter dial right here. The first thing is, do not adjust the shutter dial unless the shutter is armed. Because if you adjust it, well, first off, it's not going to actually let me do it now that the shutter's been fired. But yeah, apparently if you are able somehow to adjust the shutter dial when the shutter isn't armed, that can mess up the mechanism. You do not want to do any kind of action with the camera at all if the shutter button is at all pressed or even lightly touched. So if you do anything, if you're even holding your finger on this right here, you do not want to remove the film back or make adjustments because that can apparently jam the shutter. Ooh, I don't like that sound at all. Let's try that again. This should be spinning. The gearing in here is not properly engaging right now. Yeah, this should spin when I don't like that sound. I'm not going to do that again. Okay, this camera. The shutter must be fired before removing the lens in order to prevent damage to the lens mechanism. And I may actually have done that wrong when I removed the lens. But basically, this is the aperture control right here. With this specific lens, you arm the lens using a lever here, and then when the shutter's fired, the lens closes. I'll show you that again. You select the lens aperture right here on this ring, so you can select it at any point, even after you've armed it. Okay, and then when the photo's taken, there's this little mechanism inside the camera that pulls this shut, and shuts the aperture right before the shutter curtain opens and closes in the camera. So pretty straightforward and simple mechanism, but you can't take the lens off without first firing the shutter without risking damage to the whole mechanism. Before cocking the shutter by rotating this forward, you must remove the dark slide. Now, I mentioned earlier that there was this part right down here on the film holder that's for communication. That actually is a safety so that you cannot do anything with this camera with the dark slide in place. You can see how the dark slide sort of covers that. That's a safety connection to communicate between the camera or with the camera and the film back when the dark slide is or isn't in place. One of the many ways that this camera can skip a frame is if you put a film back on the camera and then arm the shutter. The camera will advance the film. It's not like a Bronica where you can put a film back on at any time, advance the shutter, and it will only advance the film if it needs to be advanced. This will always advance the film when you arm the shutter like this. Well, I'm not doing that again. So anytime you do this action, it should, in theory, be advancing the film. Nope. All right. The next thing is only ever load a film holder that has onto the camera with the shutter armed, okay? When installing the film holder, ensure that the two colored windows on the sides match. That could also have been another. There are so many steps to make this thing work right. Make sure the shutter's armed when you mount the film holder. Make sure the dark slide is perfectly put in. Make sure that the gearing in this is aligned. Make sure that these two colors are the same. Like, it is like this camera is designed to make it hard to use it correctly so that people will accidentally screw it up. I mean, I know that's not the case, but like this is such a fiddly camera. Anyway, when you install the film holder, ensure that the two colored windows on the side match. The next thing is we're going to take the film back off because on the back of the camera, there's the serial number that we saw, right? And the first two digits of the serial number down here, 74, indicate the year in which the camera was produced. So we know that this camera was made in 1974, so a relatively early one. Also, we know that from the script on the front of it. So, because I believe they changed the name. Yeah, they did after 1980. And you can also see the logo of the Arsenal factory down here. You know, also, and I think my last tip that I have for you on this is that these cameras have a reputation of having been built from the scrapped pieces of Russian T-45 tanks. And, I mean, we do, by the way, say that lovingly and in jest, but it's actually not true. And compared to other cameras of this camera's vintage, it's really not robust. I don't know how much of the nonsense I've had to deal with in just this video I'm going to leave in or edit out. But this camera is really finicky, really fidgety. The shutter on it, quite frankly, on this one right here, doesn't work half the time. Like, I'll set it to a shutter speed and it will just kind of jitter, or it will go halfway and then stop. It takes about 5 or 6 test firings before the shutter starts to work correctly. So I have run about 6 rolls of film through this camera, and I've had one picture that turned out was properly exposed. There was anything on the frame at all, just one. Because all of the magical sequences that have to happen to make this camera deliver a photo align so infrequently that it's just very hard to get photos out of this camera. It's immensely, immensely frustrating. Anyway, my last tip is to remember that your Kiev 80 is a precision tool that should be handled with care and respect. Normally, this is the part at which I would say, as long as you take care of your camera will take care of you. But look, this camera ain't going to take care of you. It's incredibly, incredibly frustrating and hard to use, and just really difficult. It really honestly feels like this camera hates existing. I'm not going to lie. So at any rate, that's the first of 2 videos on the Kiev 80. In the second video, we're going to go over everything about, now that we've seen what everything is on it, we're going to go through all of the different functions, and fingers crossed, maybe 1 or 2 of them will actually work. See you guys in that video.